If you want to learn more about effective management, head over to mattsingers.com and sign up for my free management training.
Welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast from madsingers.com, where entrepreneurs and business managers learn and share. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a review.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Stewart Townsend. Welcome to the show, Stewart.
Hi, Mads. Thanks a lot for having me. Totally appreciated.
I am excited for today, Stewart.
Me too. I'd like to be more excited if we had some sunshine in the UK, but we're British, so we always complain about that. But now I'm looking forward to it.
That's it. So, Stewart, some people around the world still don't know who you are. Would you mind doing a quick introduction so they get to know a little bit more about you?
Yeah, of course. For those in the dark corners of the remit that haven't seen my flowery shirts, my name's Stewart Townsend. I've been in IT for 20 plus years, maybe longer. I've been in sales for 30 plus. That'll give you some context of how old I am. There's a prize if you guess what that is. I started my career at Sun Microsystems, which for those of you who are quite young won't know, but they invented Solaris, they invented Java, invented loads of stuff, which was awesome. And then Oracle bought them and I joined Oracle. So I spent sort of 12 to 14 years in corporate life before then heading to startup land and cutting my teeth and actually doing real work in small companies. So been around a little bit.
Excellent. Yeah, I was also, do we call that, raised in the corporate world. So I've had my joys with that as well.
Yeah,
very good.
You've walked the halls and done the political thing and had coffee with people for 12 hours a day. Yeah, good old corporate land.
Yeah, my only struggle and probably why, one of the reasons why I was as successful as I were was probably because I don't drink coffee. So that that eliminated some of that problem. But yeah. So Stewart, we want to talk management today, and I would like to start talking a little bit about sales teams, because as you mentioned, you've been working with sales teams for a long time, and lots of the people listening to this podcast is also wanting to grow their sales teams and wanting to do more, right? A lot of entrepreneurs start out small and, you know, they're all eager. I'm one of them. We're all eager to grow our businesses and become better. So how do we do? What do we do?
So I'm going to be a little bit biased with this response. But again, just to give you some context around that. So when I was working at Sun and Oracle, I came across this area called business development and channel sales. And I was at the time in pre-sales. So I was carrying the bags of salespeople, doing all the technical due diligence, and they were getting paid loads of money and driving the Porsches. So I saw the grass was greener on the other side. So I didn't go into what we term nowadays direct sales, or then we did. I went into indirect sales. And for those that don't know what that actually is, it's basically you're getting, think of it in the world of sort of e-commerce, SEO, etc., getting affiliates or referrals to sell your product for you, and you pay them a fee. So that's my background. I've worked in that for forever, like I say, more than 20 years now, of trying to persuade other people to take my piece of software or my piece of hardware and then go and sell it out. And for those that then think that's quite easy, it's not, because it's a double sale. And then what I've done beyond that is obviously then go and manage teams and such and that sort of thing. So over the years, I've sort of managed myself and managed teams around that, and managed partners and managed their sales teams. So ask away any questions around the pain of that, because yeah, smashing your head against the wall for a period of time. And not just done that in corporate as well. I've done that in, a small 20-person company, growing that to sort of like 100 people. And then I was building the channel in Zendesk pre-IPO as well. So I joined that company when there were about 200 people and left at 1,500 post-IPO.
Nice. Yeah, and I mean, I think the situation a lot of business owners find themselves in is really the business started, they're making money, and they want to grow bigger, right? So they want to, and particularly, I think particularly a lot of the SEO agencies and so on that I've worked with, at least, they're all looking to grow. They're all looking to find that magic bullet because, you know, a lot of them is kind of fighting churn a little bit. So, you know, they have a certain amount of people coming in, they have a certain amount of people coming out, but, you know, they want to grow, and it really requires to kick up the sales efforts a lot, right? So any particular strategies or something like that around how to get sales going in a relatively small agency, for example?
Yeah, so I've worked with agencies from a vendor side. Excuse me. So, and those conversations have always gone the line of, you know, you're doing SEO, but why don't you do other value-added reseller services alongside that? So rather than trying to just sell your SEO services into clients, because you've already got the trust of those clients as well, and you don't want them to churn, by attaching other products and other people's services to that, it makes it more sticky.
Yep.
So that goes back to the aspect of, you know, going old school, you're selling sort of websites in the day, which, yeah, a race to the bottom now. But selling SEO and optimizing that on Facebook ads and those sort of things is, what other products are out there that can give stickiness to your value? So it could be things like with Beacon or with, Stream Agility, where you're looking at actually reducing pay per click around that, and actually reducing their spend, but increasing the value to the client around that. And that's how I've sort of operated in a sales organization, is rather than sort of worrying about the churn of the customers you've got, don't worry about that. Think about what's the extra value and what's the extra margin you can make on those customers, and make them stickier by attaching more services. Because once you've got 2 or 3 services in that client, it's hard for them to move away. If they've just got one, they can cancel that contract tomorrow. It's not of value. But if there's 2 or 3 that go across different business units or different responsibilities, it's harder to move away. And also you'll get more margin per user across that base for doing the same amount of work most of the time. You know, once you've incurred the cost of selling, you've done that, actual management of the client is still the same. You just add an extra value because you choose services that are automated or provide more insights or make people look good, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, when I talk with clients, customer lifetime value is always key, all right? But I see particularly a lot of small businesses trying to do way too many things and not ending up doing any of it very well. And that's definitely something you need to be a little bit careful with as well, right? But I think particularly in terms of, I mean, my favorite strategy is really finding others who are doing it well. So if you're doing SEO, if you find someone else to do AdWords, or like someone you can collaborate with somehow, right, where you don't need to necessarily be the expert in everything, but you know, you can collaborate with someone else who is, and therefore build that dependency and basically offer the clients more services that way. That's definitely an option that I've seen a lot of people use quite successfully.
Yeah, most definitely. I think, yeah, it's a good piece of advice, Mads, and I'd concur with that. Is, yeah, don't try and be the champion of everything. There's no point. But if you can bring in other champions that are experts in parallel services, then do that, because otherwise you just end up, you know, the agencies. I used to be an MD of an organization called Digital Lancashire, and it was about getting digital services across the county that I live in, the UK. And you see agencies that would do that. They go, right, okay, we're selling SEO or we're designing the website. Now we're becoming an expert in Facebook ads, not knowing anything about it, kill themselves over it, make no money, customers unhappy. And then they'd end up losing the business they've got already because they were poor at the other service. And it just brings your value down really quickly.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's the key, right? Like you definitely want to make sure you have the skill set to deliver, and it's also understanding, like, you know, what the customers actually need and what makes sense, right? Sometimes I see people just selling to try and sell and make a little bit extra money, but again, you want to cover a need rather than just make some short-term money for sort of long-term difficulty, if you will, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay, that's good. That's good, Stuart. Anything else? Any other good tips sort of in this sort of startup phase for companies? Like any other So beside having sort of multiple offerings and so on, and by the way, you mentioned web devs. Like web devs are one of the ones where I always say find people to collaborate with.
Yeah.
Right? Find people. Like if you're a web dev, you want to find a SEO company. You want to find a social media company. You want to find some pay-per-click people, and you want to, like, even if you set up a deal with them and just refer people to them, like that's much better, because that way you still get something out of it in the end, right? But you definitely want to set up something so that you basically end up making more from that one customer. Because I mean, I've initially, when I first moved to the Philippines, I was trying to do a little bit of, selling websites and stuff, and that's like 80% a sales job, and no time spent actually building websites, because you're so busy constantly selling, because it's do a job, find a new client, do a job, find a new client, and so on, right? So that's a very tough one.
Yeah, it's always a race to the bottom in that sort of space, isn't it?
Yes.
But yeah, I think, going back to sort of advice for small companies in generalization, not just agencies and such, I think it's just around having that plan and strategy and focusing on who is your customer. Who are you trying to sell to, and what value are you trying to bring to them, and don't try and sell them the farm. Basically, I see a lot of companies that set up, they try and sort of offer too many things, or as an agency too much, or as an e-commerce company too many products, rather than niching down and going, you know what, I'm the best SEO agency for farmers, or the best SEO agency for excuse me, for consultants, rather than just being, we do SEO for everybody, is have a plan. And I'm just in this, my business at the moment, and I've sort of got some time to sit back and think. It's like, who is the person I'm trying to sell to, and what's the value I'm really going to bring them, and cut out the noise. Because there's just so much competition out there in general across the base of agencies and those sort of things, that you need to differentiate and stand out from the crowd. And there's still plenty of space out there to go for it. But I think, for me, the core is strategy, focus, define who you're going to go after and stick to it. And if it doesn't work, stop it really quickly, as you would in a startup, and go into something else. Don't keep smashing your head against the wall.
Yeah, but and I would say one of the biggest issue most companies, at least the ones I work with, see is like lead generation is very difficult. And I've always found that the more you niche down, the more specific you get about who you serve, the easier lead generation becomes, right? Because if you're trying to hit anyone anywhere, like everyone on planet Earth is bombarded every day with spam mails about, I can build your website for $5 or $10 or something, right? But if you build websites specifically for carpenters or specifically for dentists or whatever, like that, it makes the lead generation so much easier, because you have a very, very targeted audience to actually go after, right? And your specific case studies that matches them exactly, and so on. So it just becomes a lot more appealing to them as well, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's and again, same with me at the moment. I'm sort of looking. Well, I'm not looking. I am building out my sort of pipeline and building out some content and such, and it makes it a whole lot easier if you niche down. So I'm looking at European B2B SaaS companies, because everybody deals with the US. They look at the US and talk about the US, but nobody's talking about what's happening in Europe or moving over to APAC. It just makes life a whole lot easier, and especially if you want to offer lead generation out as a service as well, you need to be really good at it yourself. So yeah, niching is good.
Excellent. What's the biggest sort of management mistake you have ever made, Stewart?
I think it's not making a decision quick enough to remove somebody. Right. And I'll give you some context around that. I can't sort of say the full thing, but just context. Sure. So whenever you hire somebody, you go through that romance of interviewing, getting, depending again if it's corporate or a larger startup. It's in a smaller company, it's a bit different. It's more one-to-one, isn't it? But as you grow bigger, that interview process becomes longer, and your colleagues interview the person, etc., etc. So person starts and they start doing stuff, and you realize you've made a mistake, but you think, I'll keep on with this, it'll be fine, they'll turn it around, We've got 3 to 6 months around sort of an interim period around that. And it's not going with my gut and letting people go sooner and hoping they would turn around and trying to get them to sort of work to deliver against the goals and KPIs in place. I think, that for me, it's an age thing. Over time, I've learned you've just got to make that decision and get on with it. As hard as it may seem, it's took me a long time to get there. But when I was sort of running teams in my 30s, early 40s, I didn't make those decisions quick enough. And I paid for it because, it impacted my delivery back to the organization. It impacted my reputation because my team wasn't performing how they should be. So that's, it's not so much a mistake. Well, it is a mistake, but it's more just about trust your gut and sort of lessons learned is it's not bad. It may feel uncomfortable, but it's not a bad thing to let people go earlier on and make that decision, because the impact they have across the organization or the sales team or other people gets worse as time goes on, because they can see that they're not the right fit as well. So, for me, that's something, as if I run a team again or sort of move into that sort of space where I'm working in a team, it's just that make a decision like that in a heartbeat rather than holding back.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And one thing that actually really helped me originally when, I mean, everyone hates firing people, but I've really struggled with it initially, right? And one of the things that really helped me was exactly what you alluded to, the fact that, when people aren't performing, they know, and they're generally not happy, right? So many years ago, I learned the fact that people who have an easy job, that doesn't necessarily make them happy, but generally people who are performing well tend to be happy in their job. And therefore, when you're actually extending the pain of someone who's not performing, you're basically making their recovery, and you're basically making the time that it will take them to get back and find another job and so on much longer and much worse. So therefore, when you let people go early, you are actually doing them a favor, because they don't end up stuck in a job that they are not good at, not delivering, and either an unhappy boss or unhappy people generally around them. So that kind of mindset really helped me a lot, right? But I love it. That's absolutely a key thing, and I think we've all been there, right? I mean, sometimes you're so desperate for resources, you're like, yeah, it will work out, it'll work out, but I totally agree with you. Sometimes when you have a hunch and you're like, oh, I stepped in the wrong staff member here, it's better to take the hit and just let it go and move on, because for any business, it's all about people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also it's that sort of component of how could it be so wrong? Why didn't I spot it in the interview? And sometimes it's people interview well and come across really well and capable of doing a job. It's just that they don't fit the thinking or the team or the structure as well as you thought they did around that. And it's not, like you say, it's not a bad thing. It's a good way of looking at Mads, actually, is they're not happy. They're in there and they're trying to push themselves as well to do the job or fit in. But overall, they're probably not feeling the love for the job or the role or the passion. So by doing that, you're giving them opportunity, like you say, to go and find a role that they can excel at, because you're basically holding their career back.
Exactly. And one thing, so kind of in regards to that, right? One thing that I see a lot of people do is they're afraid of making the step. And if instead of firing people, they often end up like moving them around to a different role or something. And two concepts that's important, right? One is that, sometimes you have a great person who was put in the wrong role. Or sometimes you have the wrong person who was put maybe in the right role, but they're just not the right person for the company, right? And when you have someone who's just not a good fit for the company, even though it's uncomfortable, you really have to bite the bullet and you have to let them go, right? Because just pushing the problem to another department or pushing the problem somewhere else in the business is not going to help you. right?
Oh, yeah,
It's gonna make
totally.
it worse. And the smaller the business, the more an impact someone like that has, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think I don't know if it's a generic term, but we call it a special project. So you've got a desk by
Yeah,
the door, and you're on a special project. It basically means that we're trying to put you're being moved somewhere, so you can't sort of disrupt the business too much, but we don't really know what to do with you. But nobody will make a decision to let you go, sort of thing.
yeah,
But yeah, most definitely in a small company, you've got to make those decisions quick because you haven't got the fat to allow for to take up that sweat. Whereas in a corporate, people just can get lost in the
yeah.
halls somewhere. Yeah,
And particularly, so the one thing that's key as well, right, is that sometimes you might have a really good person, but they've been mismatched to the job, and sometimes it's still important to let them go, because what you don't want to do, like let's say you hire someone for customer service, but they suck at it, and you move them somewhere else. If you don't have the budget, and if you don't actually have the need for that individual, then again, for a small business in particular, you're often much better letting them go, right? Just because it's a good person, if that's not what you need at that point in time, again, it can really, really hold your business back to be spending a ton of resources in a place where it's not where you really want to invest at that point in time, right?
yeah, I totally agree. It's yeah, make that decision quick, and yeah, you don't have those resources.
Definitely. Okay, that's good, Stuart. That's good. From a management perspective, what's sort of one of the most difficult situations you've been in where you've really sort of, really had to make some difficult decisions, and how did you go about doing that?
I think it's probably quite a while ago around that, but it was just looking at structure of teams and going through the redundancy process and making those sort of decisions. It's
Yeah,
hard. Again, sort of in a sort of corporate type role. Oh God, when was it? The 2000s? Yeah. That was quite sort of happening quite a bit, and being part of that process and thinking, right, okay, you've got a legal obligation that you go through and all that sort of admin side, but morally, that you're having to let people go that are perfectly capable of doing roles, really good at what they do, but as a company, you can't afford those headcounts anymore.
yeah,
And I think, again, sort of turning that back into a smaller company is as you're hiring people and you're growing, and say you start, you get to that place, you got seed investment and Series A, and suddenly as an agency you grow and you got loads of offices and there's a downturn. That will be the worst moment of your life, because you like we've just been talking about, you let people go because they're not doing the jobs or whatever it may be. But if you're a manager running a team and you've got 10 people and they're all perfectly capable, they've got mortgages, the families, all that sort of thing, but because of economic reasons you have to let them go, it's just it's heartbreaking. And you've got to be
it's
really sort of not aggressive, that's not the right word. You've got to detach yourself from that. But it's not something, I think, as a piece of advice, as a sort of company that's growing and managing people, always think about that in your back of your mind. If you've got to do that, grow and scale accordingly. Don't just take headcounts on and go crazy, because that is a hard process to go through.
Yeah, and I've been there, and I mean, I've definitely been in organizations where where you feel it's unfair. And I mean, when I worked in IBM, for example, it would be like, oh, the stock price this quarter is horrible, we need to cut 20% cost, and we need to improve our performance at the same time. And you're like, thanks. So I managed 100 people. Now I'm managing 80, but I have to do much better than I did with 100. That's great. But sometimes, but particularly some of the very big companies, when you're in the stock exchange and stuff, there's all these external forces that just, it sometimes feels a bit unfair, or it feels difficult to deal with when it's not because you've been performing lousy, or not because sales drops or whatever, but it's just pure external factors, right?
Exactly, yeah. And you don't have any bearing or impact on that, because your team may be smashing it, doing awesome, but as a company, we've got to cut costs around that, and it's a process that has to go through from a sort of legal obligation, depending on the country and the district. But it's hard because you then have to go, well, everybody's smashing it. How do I choose? And it's just a challenge, and it is unfair because sometimes it is just outside forces, like you say, downturn in stock price, the economy as a general, whatever it may be. But you're forced into that position of having to go through that process and do that. And I think that for me is definitely it's a hard experience. It makes you think about hiring people and bring them on board and thinking, right, okay, do I really need this headcount? Is it what's going to happen, etc.
Yeah, very good, Stuart. Very good. I think this has been an absolutely excellent conversation. If people are eager to get hold of you, what's the best place to do that?
So if you want to know more about Channel and about me, I have a website called Channel as it's the actual URL is, and I'll send it for the show notes, is channelasservice.com. And that's basically around indirect sales. You'll understand more about referrals, affiliates and resellers, that sort of thing. So there's loads of blog content on there, ebooks and how to build your own reseller program around that as well. And then you'll find somewhere on the web some crazy images of me wearing flowery shirts and eating pizza from my corporate days. So we won't talk about those sites.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah. That's awesome. I'll make sure all your data is included in the show notes, Stuart. And thank you very much for joining me today.
Hey, no, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's good to hear somebody else from corporate land as well. I didn't realize you're from IBM. Sworn enemies in the day. It was quite ironic. Yeah, IBM and Microsoft weren't allowed to talk to anybody from those companies. Oh my gosh.
That definitely. So thank you very much, Stuart, and to the audience. We will talk again next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Please leave a review. It means the world to us. You can also learn more about management at madsingers.com.